Happy Wednesday evening. As discussed, if you happen to follow my social media and see the story, we are going over a market update. Most of the time, I like these videos to be really just kind of off the cuff and informative in general. Nothing that honestly takes me a ton of time to prepare for. But things that are common to me may not be common to you. This one, I'm really excited because it is the beginning of the month. Also, it's back to school time, summer's wrapping up. And there's always this idea that this time of year real estate pauses. I've never personally seen that. It does get slightly less hectic because families who specifically want to move between school years are usually, settled with that. But that's why it's a perfect time to go ahead and do a market update so we can see what's happening right now, what's happened in the past, and you guys can kind of figure out where you want to go from here. So if you're not someone who has to move at an exact time or really wants to move in the summer for a set school year, then you may be like most people where you are, kind of watching prices, reading different news sources, and trying to get an idea of what's going on in this crazy market and when you should be looking to make a move, right? So we're going to talk about that, and it'll be great. And I have data, which I actually really, really like. It just takes a little more time. So, other caveat is most of you know I am a member of two different associations. One of them is Greater Chattanooga, and that encompasses Tennessee and North Georgia. And then also Valley MLS, which is Northeast Alabama all the way, including Huntsville. And that one's through the Huntsville Association. So we're going to focus more on Chattanooga, but also add in some Alabama as well, just because my territory kind of bleeds over into all three states, right? So the biggest thing that I see is people saying, oh, prices are so high, rates are so high, there's not enough inventory on the market, and so we're just having bidding wars on every house still, and I'm going to wait until blank. I'm going to wait until there's more inventory. I'm going to wait until rates are lower. I'm going to wait until prices come down. While those are all really smart in theory, it just doesn't follow where projections are. And so that's what we're going to go over, and we will look at a lot of what ifs as well. The main thing to note is where we are as far as sales and inventory. So it's the biggest thing, supply and demand. Hopefully we know this concept. But the less homes there are on the market compared to the number of buyers, the higher the prices are. When there are way too many homes and no buyers, then the prices come down. Great thing with real estate, if you already own, is that real estate is a pretty safe investment. It almost always appreciates. Even if there is a slight dip in depreciation in a really tough market, 9 times out of 10, it's a bump in the road. And unless you are personally in a situation where you have no choice but to sell, you're always going to make a profit. The question is how much. So if we look at Greater Chattanooga area, which again is Chattanooga, parts of Cleveland, parts of North Georgia, all the way over to like South Pittsburgh area, we are going to take July of 2022 to July of 2023 because that's our most recent full month data compared to the year prior. So in 2022, in July, median sales price in the Greater Chattanooga area was $309,000. This year, that jumped to $325,000. So then, we have that question of inventory. The interesting thing is that we have more inventory now. So the way that it's calculated is kind of month supply. And that's what we look at is, how many homes are on the market compared to the buyers and how long does it last. So we had 1.93 months supply last year, and that's up to 2.22 now. So our supply and number of homes are fairly stable, but it's actually gone up. So there is a slight bit more inventory now than there was last year, yet those prices have continued to increase. So I don't want you to say, oh, when there's more homes on the market, they'll be cheaper, because we're seeing more homes on the market and they're still not cheaper. It's going up significantly. The other thing is how long you have to make a decision. So during and a little bit after COVID, when interest rates plummeted, everyone was out shopping for a house because their money went twice as far. You're looking at 30 offers on every house. You better have your pre-approval ready, and you need to be, shelling it out. The nice thing is it's not quite that scary now, but you do still need to be prepared. I would not encourage you to go look at a house you really, really love and think you want if you do not yet have a pre-approval. And the reason is because days on market are still pretty low. So average days on market in July of 2022 was 5. This year it's 8. So there is an increase. But it's still, around a week. So, and that's the average, right? There are some homes, especially multi-million-dollar homes, that are on the market for a year or two. And then there are the houses that are still going in a day or two. Thankfully, it's not always 2 hours. Sometimes you get a day. But you need to have everything ready to go. The other thing with that is, first let me backtrack a little bit. We'll compare Alabama to. So Alabama's a little bit more interesting because it's kind of been like this. Okay. So Alabama, if you just look at July, last year was roughly 310. And this year's 3075. So that sounds like it's coming down, and that's great. But what I would encourage you to look at is comparing the January as well. So January of 2022, we were at 273 roughly. And then this January jumped to 285. So it's still 10,000 more. And then as you can see, it's increased since then. So what we're seeing is less of a seasonal change this year than we did last year. So prices are still staying steady or climbing, but the market is staying more consistent throughout the year. So again, that means if you're waiting for prices to come down, don't, because they're not going to. Same thing, days on market are similar to the Chattanooga area. Last year was 4, this year's 7. Same conversation there. You're going to want to make sure that you have everything ready to go if you're buying. If you're selling, I'm a little bit aggressive on the selling side. It really isn't a huge deal until you hit 30 days in this market. But if we have, a week on market and we're not under contract or at least received a couple offers, we're looking at what we can do because I expect it to be faster. Of course, it depends on your situation, but if you tell me you're ready to move, then my job is to move you, right? And same thing in supply with Alabama. So last year was 2.1 months, and then this year is 2.7 months. So supply, again, has increased a little bit, but we're not seeing that translate to lower prices, let alone lower prices long term. So if we are waiting for more supply and lower prices, don't. It's not going to happen. In the same token, rental prices continue to increase as well. So if you don't currently own and you're looking at when is the right time to buy the first house, keep that in mind too. Obviously, we don't want you to be in a situation where you can't afford the maintenance on your home or your house payment is too high. But if you're looking at your rent increasing at your lease end date, then we should probably be looking at what we can do to get you into a home purchase, so that even if you do see an increase, it's going to remain that number for 30 years, unless, taxes, insurance. But your principal mortgage payment itself isn't going to increase like rent is. So the other thing I see a lot of talk about lately are interest rates, right? Because we all got so excited about 2s and 3s and things that we'll probably never see again. And I hope we don't, because if we do, that means there's some sort of catastrophe going on that we are trying to combat. So rate projections, this is the nice thing. They have come down a little bit since the beginning of the year. They are projected to come down a little bit more throughout the rest of the year. And then we may even see them dip down even lower in early 2024. I would still caution you on waiting, only because while the rates are doing this, the prices are still doing this, right? So did a little math here for you, and we can run through it. And if you have a specific instance where you want to run some numbers and see what it might look like now versus later, we can run those, especially if you're paying off debt and maybe you're going to get a better rate later with a better loan type, or just have more comfort in making that payment. Then sometimes these differences aren't worth it to jump right now, and it is still worth getting that later. But just comparing over why I would still not wait for things to drop. So if we just go with, we'll say Greater Chattanooga's numbers. So if we're looking at, and I'm going to kind of go, just because I don't know what prices will be this time in 2024, we're going to take the prices of this year and last year with the rate projections of this year and next year, if you're tracking with me. Don't forget, comments are open. If you guys have questions, throw them in. I'll respond. If all of this is really confusing, or you're visual like me and you want to see what I'm looking at, I'm happy to email it to you. We can sit down in person and go over the data. So if I'm just kind of like talking and it's going, that's okay. Just reach out and we will go over it in person, or however we need to do it. That is more one-on-one. But if we're taking 2022's median price of $309, and then currently, and I don't really like to talk about rates, and my lender friends don't like it when agents talk about rates because they are different. So keep in mind your loan type, your credit score, your debt to income, your whole buying financial picture is going to affect what your personal rate is. So we're just going random averages, shooting from the hip. Okay. This is not the rate you can expect necessarily. You got to talk to a lender. I can help you get connected. But if we're going last year's price of $309, and we'll just say we're at roughly a 6.5%, because that's projected averages. If you're doing 3% down on a conventional loan, you're looking at a payment of roughly $2,300 a month. Okay. If you do the same calculation, well, not really. If you then take this year's price of $325, and let's just say the rates have dropped to 6% towards the end of the year. So we're going to cut you a little bit of difference on the rate. That 0.5% on your rate, you would think it would go down, but because your price has increased $15,000, $16,000, guess what? That payment is $23,000 still. You're technically $2 more with a lower rate because you're financing a higher amount. So it's coming out in the wash. The rate's really not helping you that much. So then let's take it a step further and say, well, if it's projected, it could drop even as low as 5.2 in, I don't know, beginning to mid 2024. Again, these are kind of guesses. If it stayed at 325, which it probably won't, but if it stayed at 325 and that 5.2% rate, you'd be looking at $21,045. So you're saving roughly $150 a month. And that's if prices don't increase. If they increase, you're looking at the same payment with a lower rate. Now, I want to take this a step further and say, if we had bought with that 309 price with the 6.5 interest rate and took the 2,300 per month, and then next year when rates drop, the price of your house didn't change, right? If anything, it went up and your equity is higher, and maybe you don't mortgage insurance. Should have started with that. If you owe less than 80% of your mortgage, so if you do a 20% down payment or you pay it off to where you're, paid 20% in, then you don't need mortgage insurance. That drops your rate, not your rate, but your payment as well. So considering that it increased value, sometimes you can go ahead and hit that number just by having another appraisal and not paying into that amount because your value is different, right? But I digress. Again, I probably shouldn't have even touched on that. But backing it up again, let's go back and say that we have the 309 purchase price. Bought it at the 6.5%, payments $2,300, right? Then early next year, say rates do go to 5.2 and you refinance. Your number is going to be lower because you've already made payments, but we're just going to run it on the 309 at 5.2. That payment reduces to $2,054. So that's $100 cheaper a month than if you had the 325 at 5.2. Right? So that's where, you may see agents say this really cheesy phrase, marry the house, date the rate. And it sounds crazy and it sounds like a sales tactic to try to get you to buy now because they want a fat check, right? First of all, I wish checks were as fat as it looked like they were. That's a whole other conversation. But the reason that people are saying this is because it's really true, right? Obviously, if it's not comfortable now, don't do it. Wait till you're in a position to purchase. But if you can now, the same as you can later, realistically, whether rates stay the same or drop, buying now versus buying later, you're going to end up with the same payment because the purchase prices are still going up. If you buy now and you keep your credit great and nothing significantly changes with your income or your credit score, you can refinance and drop that payment down. And you're going to be way ahead of people that are buying then with that lower rate that are having the same payment that you would have now. So those are things to consider. I really like market updates too, because you just you go where the data takes you, right? So again, when I saw the slight dip in July in Alabama, I was like, whoa, why? And then you can see that it's just, stayed pretty level, which is nice. Projections are that it will go back up. So keep that in mind as well, but really more so in the Chattanooga area. We are still expanding, exploding, all that jazz. Prices are not coming down. They're not even really holding. They just keep climbing. So keep that in mind. Again, data is great because it doesn't have an agenda. It is just what it is. And then when we break it down, we're able to see that, yes, it is still paying to go ahead and get into a home now because you're going to pay more later, even if rates come down. So I hope this has been helpful. And again, if you guys have any questions or want a more detailed breakdown, if you want to run it on a specific house, if you want to see what yours is right now and what money you might be able to pocket as well, we can go through and do all that. But I hope this has been really informative. And yeah, just let me know if you need anything else, and I will see you next week.